words of our second reading from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians are most often heard at a funeral. And there, with the family gathered, with the body in its coffin, with incense and holy water, and all of the rituals that accompany someone's death, we hear the words, "Death is swallowed up in victory." Death, where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? At times they can seem almost cruel because we know where death's victory seems to be. We know where death's sting is. We look at people grieving at the passing of someone they love, especially if that person isn't elderly and at the right time, but of a younger person or somebody who dies quite unexpectedly. We know where the sting is. It's here in our hearts. And yet, we read this reading because we believe in the one with a perishable nature who put on imperishability. We know the one with a mortal nature who put on immortality. And in the person of Jesus Christ and his death and resurrection, we know in no uncertain terms, though it's sometimes hard to grasp and sometimes hard to hold, we know that we live now forever in the resurrection of Christ. And that when someone dies, their life is changed, not ended. If they've put their hope, if they've put their trust in Christ. Jesus, in our gospel today, is talking about what a person who has put their trust in Christ might look like. Someone who puts all of their hope in God and God's love. He seems to be echoing, building on what we read in Ecclesiasticus today, from this book of the church, from before the beginnings of the church. That it's easy sometimes to define someone, to determine if someone is of God. It's like using a sieve, sifting out the bad, the defects of a person. Come out of their mouth. The defects of a person are spoken aloud because when somebody is true to their inner self, they can't help but speak who they are. And Jesus goes even farther, though that may be true. He reminds us that we can look at what a person does. And if a person is truly godly, if a person is truly walking with Jesus, if a person has opened their hearts to God's redemptive grace, we will know it because we see it. They will act with kindness and love and goodness and fairness. They'll bring forth the good fruit of faith. The challenge that Jesus extends to us today is stop looking at everyone else to see where they are. Look at yourself. Are you someone who, if you were to analyze you yourself, to analyze your own speech, you would hear Christ? Are you someone who, if you could look at a video of your life over the last day or two, or the last few weeks, or the last few months, or your whole life, would we see the compassion of Christ at work, his healing touch, his transformative speech as an act? Would we see Christ alive in our world? Jesus does remind us, don't worry about your brother or sister. You've got a plank in your eye. For in fact, we all know that though we are imperfect on our journey towards Christ, we can grow ever closer to him. We can become ever more fully the person God is calling us to be. And that's why we hear from St. Paul today, never admit defeat. Keep working. Keep working at the Lord's work always. Knowing that in Christ and the Lord you can never be laboring in vain. We may come up short. We may find in our faults even more grace to allow us to transform ourselves. When we fall short and we ask God's forgiveness and we ask the forgiveness of those we may have hurt, we may be actually catapulted farther along on the journey. But what we must worry most about is not falling short, not sometimes being imperfect, being a hypocrite. Because we have to wonder if those words we speak, when they don't match the actions of our lives, who we're fooling at all. We may fool friends and neighbors for a bit. We may actually fool ourselves. But we're not fooling God. Today's readings appear dark and a bit of a warning, but they're words of hope. They call us to analyze our lives regularly, to think about what we say and how we say it, what we do and how we do it, and to assess if we're pulling them all together as one, if we're walking in the footsteps of Christ. Do our lives proclaim that death and sin is swallowed up in victory? For in the end of the day, if we wish to help our brothers and sisters take that splinter out of their eye, we have to make sure the plank is gone from our own. If we want to be men and women with hope to bring, a church that produces good fruit, we have to tend our soil. We have to allow that tree to flourish. For the choice is simple: striving along the road to salvation or hypocrisy.